I want to get into the Afterlife tier list because it's a 36-minute video, but I feel like there's going to be a lot to talk about. And if we don't like it, we could always skip it. Also, let me preface this. This isn't like I'm not being offensive to any religions or anything in this. I'm just speaking my mind as an observer.
Do we continue to exist after the death of the body? And if we do, what would that look like? I'm not suggesting that I know the answer to this question, and I also don't want to disparage any religious beliefs that help people come to terms with death. That's not really my bag. This video is just going to be analyzing some of the possibilities, and trying to figure out whether they're good or bad.
All right. Nothing. It's a depressing start.
You die, and that's it. Nothing. You cease to exist. Death is the permanent end of experience. Eternal nothingness. This is the most straightforward scenario. Death is the end of life, so the idea that there is life after death is obviously false. Our fear of death is biologically programmed into us, and to an extent it's unavoidable. But maybe philosophy can help us reason our way out of this situation.
Well, I will say I'm kind of in this opinion that nothing happens after death, but I believe that here's what I think. Here's what I think. I think depressing start as if you aren't watching a video about death. That's a good point. That's a good point. Anyways, I think personally, right now, as of right now in my life, obviously, honestly, most likely this will change. I think that it'll be nothing, but at some point our matter will get reformed into a new life form, whether that be through an animal or something, not reincarnation, but like scientifically will decompose into the ground, and then like millions, maybe billions of years later, we end up in a different life form and then are conscious again. So I'm saying that you die, you don't remember anything in between. It's just a really long sleep without dreaming. You're basically under anesthesia and you don't feel like any time has passed and you don't remember your past self, but then you become conscious again. I don't know if that makes any sense or if I sound like an absolute buffoon. Also, for the people for the people watching this on YouTube right now, if you get mad at me for pausing and put it in the comments, fuck you. I'm sorry, that was a little harsh. But there's a reason that I'm reacting to videos. I at least got to put a little bit of my own sauce in there, if you know what I mean. So reincarnation, no, not reincarnation. Because reincarnation is different than what I'm saying. Because that's doing with spirituality. I'm saying like no spirits involved, nothing like that. Like just scientifically, you'll end up in another life form billions of years after you die. But reincarnation would be like in the same time frame, if that makes any sense. But I don't think that's what it is. So I'm not in the idea of reincarnation. I don't know what that theory would be called, to be honest. I know it is because I saw it somewhere and I'm like, I think I agree with that.
Is death bad? Well, you might say that someone dying is bad because they're not around anymore. That person was there, and now they're not. But I don't think this is actually the key to the badness here. Let me hit you with this thought experiment. Let's say your best friend in the whole world is this guy George. George spent years studying astrophysics, and he's about to go on an expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy to do research there for the rest of his life. You can't follow him there, and once he leaves, there will be no way to communicate with him ever again. That's a bit of a bummer. But now, let's say that instead of leaving, the rocket George is taking explodes immediately after launching, killing him instantly. The outcome is the same from your perspective. George is gone, and you'll never see him again. But the situation where the rocket explodes definitely seems worse. So the issue isn't just that George isn't around anymore. There's something important about the fact that George died. Okay, so instead of thinking about George, let's think about me. Death is bad because I won't exist anymore. And personally, I really like existing. Existing is pretty epic.
Facts. You could play games.
Is it bad for me, though? When I'm dead, I won't exist. So who would it be bad for? It's easy to think that when we die, we enter into a kind of blackness, or void, and we place ourselves into it. It's as if we sink into this pit of nothingness, and we're trapped there forever. We end up in this strange realm, with no thoughts, no sensations, no experience, and this is something that we somehow witness for eternity. But this doesn't really make sense. This is reifying nothingness. Does it actually have to be bad for me for it to still be bad? Things can be bad in different ways. Putting my hand on a hot stove is bad because I'm experiencing the pain and the badness directly. Burning my hand is immediately and intrinsically bad. But let's consider a different scenario.
I should start a new TikTok challenge. Hot stove challenge. See who can put their hand on a stove for the longest. Winner gets, what do we say, $5? Who's in? Who's in for that?
Let's say I spend my evening scrolling TikTok. The whole time I'm mildly entertained. It's a neutral experience. But what if my friends had also invited me out that night? I was scrolling TikTok alone in my room, instead of cracking a few cold ones with the boys, which would have been way more fun. That
easy 5. That's the spirit. You know what? That's the spirit. Let's go. I'm not promoting this. Theoretically, if this was a real challenge, how many seconds could you get? I don't know. I feel like, dude, I've pulled stuff out of the oven at 400 degrees without gloves on, which might have been one of the stupidest things I've ever done. But my hands didn't get burned, and I actually don't even have any scars from it, even though I probably should. Honestly, people say it's a miracle that my hands aren't burnt from that. I don't know why. But that's why I have superpowers. I'm kind of a superhero. Not all heroes wear capes as well, so. I'd win easy if you just turn the stove off. Okay. Well, that's all right. Really depends on how hot it is. Yeah, well, like let's say 300 degrees. I think 300 degrees would be a good. I think 400 it wouldn't be a fun challenge. 300 you could keep it on for like a decent amount of time.
Time I spent scrolling wasn't intrinsically bad, but it was bad compared to what I could have been doing instead. This example illustrates the deprivation account of why death might be bad. Not existing isn't bad in an inherent way, but it's bad compared to all the fun, meaningful experiences I could have if I continued to exist. Okay, but let's take this non-existing thing a little further. What if I never existed in the first place? Would this be bad? Well, it seems bad for me because I do exist now, but this runs into some major problems. Think about all the possible people that could exist. Look at our current generation right now. Let's say there are about 5 billion people who could reproduce, half men and half women. Each man could technically create a new person with each woman. And beyond that, every single egg-sperm combination of each of those pairs would also create a different person. If a different sperm won the race, I wouldn't be the same person I am now. I would be my sibling. As a rough calculation, that's 2.5 billion women times 30 years of reproduction times 12 eggs times 2.5 billion men times 50 years of reproduction times a conservative 365 ejaculations per year times about 40 million sperm per ejaculation. That works out to this number, 15 with 32 zeros.
This is how much money I have because I am massively wealthy.
And this is still only a tiny fraction. All of those potential people could also have children with each other. This could go on for potential generation after potential generation. If the deprivation account is true, you have to feel sorry for this infinite amount of people who never got the chance to exist. That seems like a bit too much emotional labor for me. Okay, but we can just fix this by adjusting the deprivation account a little bit. Instead of a deprivation of life, it's a deprivation of a life that actually existed at some point. This seems to have filled the hole I just poked in the argument. But there's still a problem. The section of time after your death isn't the only section of time you don't exist. You also don't exist
before
you're born. But who really cares about that? If you told me that I'm only going to live to age 50, I would be bummed out, and I would wish that I could live longer.
I don't know why, but I wish I grew up like 5 years before the internet started. I'm not like one of those people that's like, oh, I wish I was born. Dude, I was born in the wrong generation, bro. I was born in the wrong generation. I would have been so sick in the 80s. Let's be honest, bro. Let's be honest. You use things every day that aren't even close to being possible in the 80s. Anyways, I would like to know what life would have been like before the internet, because I have absolutely no scale of how the world even worked. Bro, like using maps instead of GPS. I, I don't know, bro. I don't know the city 10 minutes away from me. I don't know any of the street signs over there. I don't know anything besides the three places that I go most of the time in my car. Like, I'm cooked. Dude, if the internet wasn't a thing, I'm cooked immediately. Immediately. I'm just being honest with myself. I don't want to say that, but I am. You just didn't use the internet as much as a kid. I didn't, but I guess more well, because if I was 5 years before the internet was invented, which would be like, I don't know what, like 1980 something, um, then I would have had still, in my like teens, I still would have been not using internet nearly as much as I did now. So like I still would have gotten a lot of non-internet usage. And the reason I say only 5 years before is because I still want the benefits. I just want something to compare it to. Because I feel like I don't even have a thing to compare it to. I mean, the thing I used the internet as a kid for the most part was just watching YouTube videos. But I didn't really do anything else besides that. Basically just YouTube for like for a long time. I just used YouTube for a long time and I didn't really do anything else. Like, bro, nowadays there's people in like second grade on Instagram. Like, what the hell is that? What are you even doing on there? I don't understand why some kids use some of these apps, but I don't know. Maybe I'm unk. This is what your parents say all the time for why the generation is the best. So would they be? Are they Gen X or millennials? Because Gen X really had like they went through. They were like 20s. They were in their 20s when the internet came out. So like they were pretty old in terms of now. But it is wild to me, bro. I just thought about this the other day. How my parents they lived longer in the 20th century than they did in this century. Still. And I feel like we're so deep into this century. 1984 they were born. Oh, okay. So that's still I think that's just the end of Gen X, I think. Oh, no, they're millennials. Never mind. They're millennials. They're older millennials. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, my parents were born in like early 70s.
But I don't wish that I was born 50 years earlier. We seem to
No.
care
No,
more
no.
about existing in the future than existing in the past. So to
Yeah.
sum things up, non-existence after death is a complicated issue. Personally, I'm sympathetic to the deprivation account. I like existing a lot, but this is also the perspective of a guy who exists, which is definitely biased. I'll put nothingness in B tier.
I mean, that's exactly. I mean, yeah. What else would you put it at besides being average, right? Okay. Ooh, next we got heaven. Okay. Okay. This is where things get interesting.
Ranking heaven in a video like this is a little tricky. Religions that describe a heavenly realm are usually pretty vague about what it's actually like there. It's described as this perfect, beautiful place, with no pain and suffering, where we can live in bliss and worship God for eternity. But is this kind of immortality something we actually want?
I was gonna
The
say that doesn't actually sound that good. If everything's always good, then nothing's good. Because then it becomes the norm, if that makes any sense. Like the reason why we have happy moments in our life is because we have sad moments in our life. If it's all happy, then you're not actually enjoying it anymore. That's why you gotta take in the moment when you get it. Because happiness isn't an eternal state. It's just something that you could achieve in experiences. Heaven implies hell, and so you definitely hate it. All right. I will say that's one of the things that is hard for me when it comes to like religion is like most people in my life, if I did believe in heaven and hell, would be in hell. So how can I live my life knowing that a lot of my friends will eventually end up eternally suffering? That just seems depressing to me. But again, I'm not disrespecting any religions. I'm just saying my point of view from where I am.
deprivation account might say yes.
I'm
Not
knowledgeable
existing
on
is
the
bad,
subject, I feel
because
like.
you'll miss all the fun. So if we live forever, that would be ideal. Well, not exactly. At a certain point, there might not actually be anything interesting for existence to give you. You wouldn't be deprived of anything. Imagine a classic idea of heaven. We all turn into angels and spend eternity singing psalms together or something. Singing psalms is probably pretty fun to do for a while, but doing that for all of eternity seems a little excessive. What kind of life would be worth living forever? This isn't just 100 years, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, or 1,000,000,000 years.
God, we're getting into
This
big numbers
existence has
again.
no end. There are some things I love doing. Eating lamb vindaloo, solving Minesweeper puzzles, listening to Beach House, whatever. But after the first 100,000 years of doing that, it would probably get a bit stale. Okay, well, let's say you
Exactly.
take a different approach, and you try to make the most of your time. You spend 1,000 years writing novels, 1,000 years painting. You learn how to play every single instrument at an expert level. You will always run out of things to do. At some point, you will have done it all. You might be able to fix this problem with some kind of amnesia system. Let's say you get bored
Ooh.
after about 1,000 years of doing
That's
stuff.
interesting.
At this point, you start to lose your memories and forget what you did a few hundred years ago. By the time you're at 2 billion years, you could barely remember what you spent your time doing as a young 100 million-year-old angel. At this point, you've changed completely. You have different tastes, a different personality, and you spend your time doing things that you wouldn't imagine doing before. But is this really worth it? There is continuity between the young angel me and the old angel me, but is it still really me? I don't even remember.
No. It's you're essentially a completely different person at that point. I mean, that's what people in like 10 years, I say are completely different people most of the time. It actually all the time. It doesn't even matter if they still have a similar personality. They've gone through so much in that amount of time that they're not the same person anymore. They're genuinely not. I mean, they're going to think differently in some way. So it's like, you know, people sometimes, if you don't talk to somebody for a long time and then you talk to them again and you're like surprised that they're acting so differently than what you remember. I mean, bro, that's just what happens when, I mean, honestly, people change so much in like a month. It happens, bro. I mean, honestly, it happens. I feel like I've changed a lot in like the past year. Like I feel like a year ago, completely different than me now. I'm into different things. I look at things differently. I have different perspectives. It's like people don't realize that change happens so often. You know what I mean? It's not like a long-term thing all the time. It could happen quickly. It doesn't have to be, 10 years.
The previous me existing at all. My personality is totally different too, and I'm probably hanging out with different angel friends. I don't think I'd
You
want
never
something like
change,
this.
I kind of agree with you on that one, Gamer Dane. You still admit to felonies all the time in my chat like you did 3 years ago. So, you know what? Yeah.
Alright, but maybe instead of having to try to do interesting things or entertain yourself, you just experience complete bliss for eternity. Maximum pleasure. This seems appealing at first, but it also reminds me of something. There was a study where they attached electrodes to a rat's brain that released an intense burst of pleasure. They hooked this up to a button that the rat could press whenever it wanted. As you might expect, the rat just sat there pressing the button over and over until it died. But I'm not a rat. I'm a human. And it might sound arrogant, but I somehow feel like I'm above that kind of thing.
Da
I'd
Vinci.
probably really enjoy the intense bliss for the first few thousand years, but then I'd start to think to myself, is this all there is? Okay, so here's a heaven I think would actually be desirable. You can hang out there as long as you want, but the door is open. Once you're satisfied with all the things you've done, you can peace out. This scenario seems pretty good. The problem
This is
is
like being immortal and then having the option to die if you want to, which is like pretty like best case scenario, to be honest.
we don't really know which of these situations heaven would actually be, and some of these cases are just totally made up to fix the boredom problem.
Dude, I feel like heaven is so vague when people talk about it. Like everybody, even people that I know, because I know a lot of religious people, if I'm being honest, and they always describe, if they do believe in the afterlife, which not every religion does, it's kind of a misconception. They always speak in such vague terms, and it's like they really have no idea. If I'm being honest, they have no idea. I feel like it's more of like they just have a feeling about it. I'm not disrespecting it. I feel like I got to keep saying that because I don't want to make people feel like I'm trying to, make fun of their religion or anything. I just feel like there's certain things about religion that are still so everybody has different opinions on them. It's still up for debate, it seems like, even within their own communities.
The standard understanding of heaven is just that you live forever in a perfect place. If that's the type of heaven we're working with, I'm not a huge fan. C tier.
Fair. Honestly, fair. Hell, okay. This has got to go in F. I don't see how this doesn't go in F tier. I will condemn you to hell for the rest of your life. Just kidding.
Inferno. The first
Chat,
part of
chat,
Dante's
you guys are all
divine...
going to heaven, all right? Because you're in my Twitch chat, okay? And you listen, and you guys, well, I want to say you guys listen to me, but you somewhat tolerate me.
Comedy is probably the most famous depiction of hell. It has 9 circles, filled with horrible punishments like boiling in pools of blood or being submerged in frozen lakes.
Yikes.
Even Buddhism has different types of hells with intricate punishments, like the realm of the hungry ghosts. There are a lot of different depictions of what hell would actually be like, so I won't spend too much time on the details here. At least in the biblical tradition, it's important to understand that hell is a very complicated issue. From what I gather, a lot of the colloquial understanding of hell comes from medieval art and literature, and isn't actually directly based on anything the Bible says.
You ever sat down and read
I don't
this
think the
thing?
Bible
Technically, we're not
says
allowed to
that
go
much.
to the bathroom.
Some people
I don't think the Bible says that much about hell. I think it's super, like, the Bible is so vague about heaven and hell.
believe that when the Bible says eternal fire, it might not necessarily mean eternal torment. It could be that you had a soul, but it gets destroyed if you're a sinner. That would make this situation similar to nothingness. You don't experience suffering for eternity, you're just denied entry into the afterlife. But for this video, I'll consider the most common interpretation of hell, some kind of eternal suffering. If that's hell, I don't think my placement here will be particularly surprising. It's safe to say that suffering is bad. It's like burning my hand on a hot stove, like I mentioned earlier.
Whoa. Whoa. Hold on. Let's be fair here. What if you're doing it for $5? How about that? Does that change your mind?
Immediate, absolute aversion to the conscious experience of suffering. It's a fundamentally negative state of being. And not only does suffering suck, but our damnation would, in fact, be eternal. When I talked about heaven, I came to the conclusion that immortality itself comes with downsides, even if you're free to do whatever you want, or experience intense bliss. Here, all the bad things about eternity are combined with a constant state of suffering. Bottom tier.
Not surprised there. Okay, that's fair. I mean, I don't know. Ghosts? Like, like you turn into a ghost? I didn't even think about this as like an afterlife type thing. I don't know. I don't think about ghosts that much. I will say I haven't been getting a lot of sleep recently, and I have been like low-key like hallucinating. It's probably really bad. Bro, I'm probably taking like years off of my life with like my lack of sleep sometimes. But I'm not gonna lie, like when I play the drums or something, sometimes like in my peripheral vision, I swear like I see things. And I know it's because of my lack of sleep. That's the thing. That's why I'm not like, oh my god, it's a ghost. No, it's because I'm getting 4 hours of sleep every night for the past week.
Ghosts, apparitions, phantoms, specters, spirits.
Ghouls. Son of a bitch.
Surprisingly, something
Milk
like
steak.
18% of Americans believe they've had an encounter with a ghost. If you were a ghost, you would be condemned to exist in the realm of the living, no clipping through surfaces and witnessing your loved ones going through their lives. Maybe this is some kind of limbo state before you go to some afterlife. But for now, we'll just consider the ghost life. The
Like
only way you
purgatory.
can communicate with people is with a Ouija board, which, by the way, is created by Hasbro, the same company that makes Monopoly and Connect 4. Your only line of communication to your relatives is through 13-year-olds trying to induce a paranormal
3 a.m.
experience
videos.
at 3 a.m. I feel like that would get pretty frustrating. Maybe you'd be condemned to haunt a particular location for some reason. Maybe you were murdered in a particular house, and now you have to spend eternity shifting around items on the counter to freak out.
The thing is, though, I feel like being a ghost actually wouldn't be that bad because you could low key just like watch. Like it could be entertaining. I could see it being pretty entertaining. But if you could like watch people and stuff, okay, that sounds really creepy now that I'm saying that out loud. Hold the phone. Jesus. I didn't that sounds really creepy now that I'm saying that out loud. Okay. I was gonna say, if you're like if you're like watching people, I feel like you're gonna find out a lot of things that you don't want to know. And that's when it turns bad. Because like I could see it being entertaining. Because you could like, let's say if you're a ghost, I mean, you could really travel anywhere you want, right? I mean, theoretically. So you could go to like, I don't know, you could go watch professionals play like right next to them and they'll never know that you're even there. It could be kind of cool, bro, like in that sense. But then you would also see people do things that you shouldn't even know about. So then it would be like, ooh, ooh. And then you can't really do anything about it, which would suck. Okay. You know what? I'm starting to think that Ghost should be F tier. Ghost should be F tier. I'm gonna stick with that.
Whoever
It depends on your abilities too.
happens to live in that house in the future. Maybe some guy is being too much of a greedy capitalist on Christmas, and you need to visit him one night and show him visions, teaching him about the errors of his ways, and inspiring him to care more for others during the holiday season. In any of these cases, I think this would be a pretty bad existence. The stuff you're able to do would get really boring really quick. It's not
Yeah.
quite as bad as hell with the whole eternal suffering thing, but I'll
C tier. Okay.
still put it in bottom
Oh,
tier.
yep. Okay. That's what I like to see. Reincarnation. This one's really interesting. This is probably one of the most interesting ones, and that's probably why it's like the longest. Ooh, simulation. Ooh, got a little sneak peek right there.
What in tarnation? It's time to talk about reincarnation. Incarnation, more like the United States of America, with their lack of walkable cities and reliance on the automobile. Incarnation. Reincarnation is when you die and then start a new life in a different body, repeating the cycle of life and death for eternity. This idea is very, very old, and there are a lot of different takes on how exactly it might work. According to the Hindu tradition, we all have souls that get passed along through lifetimes, which explains how there's continuity from one life to the next. In very early Hindu culture, there was an almost Christian understanding of an afterlife, with a heaven and a hell. Depending on how good of a person you are in life, you end up in one of those places. But some people thought that this was too black and white. People aren't either good or bad as a whole. It's a gradation. Being good and being evil has levels to it. If you're like a slightly alright person, you'll end up in heaven with Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi. But if you're a bit of a bad dude, you'll end up in hell with Hitler. This doesn't really seem fair. But
Yeah, that seems ass, bro. Also, is it Mother Teresa? Wasn't she a fraud?
reincarnation kind of fixes this. You end up reincarnating into a new existence, directly proportional to how good you are. If you're a decent enough guy, you'll get a decent reincarnation. But if you're really min-maxing your karma, you'll get a pretty sweet reincarnation. But for the Buddhists, there isn't actually anything concrete like a soul that's carrying over. Buddhism has the famous teaching of no self, or anatman, which is the idea that nothing in the world has any kind of permanent essence to it, including our personhood. For the Buddhists, what we think is our self is composed of the 5 aggregates: form, the body, perception, consciousness, feeling, and fabrication. These structures are impermanent, but in the cycle of existence, that's what's being carried over into the next life. You can think of it kind of like the band King Crimson. Over the years, a lot of the members have left the band, and new ones have joined. After a few years, none of the founding members were there anymore. It's all new people, but it's still King Crimson.
It's like it's Theseus's ship, right? Is it still the same ship if it gets how many repairs does it take before it's not his ship anymore? If the entire ship is replaced with new parts over the span of 50 years, is it still the same ship? I don't know. I don't know.
This is
Maybe.
what the mind is like in Buddhism. There's no tangible core or identity to it, because it's constantly changing over time. Another example is the ship of Theseus.
Yep.
Imagine a ship. After a while, some of the boards start getting a bit weak, so they're replaced with new ones. New screws, new sails, everything. Eventually, every single component of the ship has been swapped out, but there's still continuity there. Ultimately, through extensive meditation and contemplation, you can achieve enlightenment, which frees you from this cycle of life and death, and you achieve nirvana.
Someone say Nirvana? For the last night, entertain us.
But they called it metempsychosis, coming from meta, to change, and empsychoon, putting a soul into. Pythagoras is probably the most famous guy from this tradition that seemed to believe in it. There was an anecdote about a puppy being beaten, and Pythagoras jumped in to stop it. He argued that when he heard the dog yelping, he recognized the soul of one of his friends. So would reincarnation be desirable? Well, for me, it kind of solves both the problems of nothingness and immortality.
Yeah,
When you
kinda.
die, your conscious experience doesn't cease to exist, so there's no deprivation of experience into the future. And it also wouldn't exactly get boring. Every new life presents you with a new mode of experience, new friends, new things to do.
This might
Maybe
be
in-
this might be S tier. This might be S tier. See, what I was talking about just has nothing to do with like spirituality or anything like that. What I'm saying is it's straight like matter. Nothing to do with like your spirit or anything. It's just that matter over time will eventually turn into new life, and then I low-key got a boring take on it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sorry.
In my next life, I'll be an orangutan running around.
Cool.
Or maybe
I would
I'll be a
rather this
famous
be true.
musician.
This would be
Who
cool.
knows? And if getting reincarnated isn't really your bag, you can just get enlightened and break from the cycle. This all seems pretty good. A tier.
That might be, bro. I feel like that should be S tier. I feel like infinite loop. What is
You
this?
die, and then immediately begin the same life again. Everything is exactly the same. You make all the same decisions. You make all the same mistakes. You work the same job.
Okay.
You have the same friends. And you die in the exact same way. Just to do it all over again for eternity.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
I mean,
This is the
actually,
famous philosophical idea of eternal return.
this
or
actually doesn't sound that bad, because if you never know that you're in an infinite loop, God, this one, like, bro, I think about it and I'm like, well, if this is true, then I'm literally experiencing it right now for an infinite time. I'm literally doing the exact thing I'm doing right now. It's just like, it feels weird to think about this one, but the way I think about it is like, that doesn't sound that bad. This one might be high rank.
eternal recurrence. It started with the Stoics, who you might be familiar with from all the self-help stuff on the internet, but it really took off when Nietzsche brought it up. His first reference to it is a thought experiment.
Is that
in the gay
Frederick?
Science. It goes like this. One day, a demon visits you and says,
Hey man, this life you're living right now, you're gonna live this same life an infinite amount of times, and there won't be anything new.
would you hate this, or would you accept it? He expanded on this some more, and thus spoke Zarathustra.
I would
The
accept
main
it.
character starts off pretty terrified at the prospect of eternal recurrence, but eventually they get over it, and end up embracing it. Now it's interesting to note that Nietzsche doesn't actually come out and say that he believes this is the case. He's not making any concrete metaphysical claim. He's just throwing it out there as a possibility.
I love philosophers that I love philosophers that do that, but it's also like, damn, bro, have a good take. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like a lot of philosophers just like they're just putting out ideas. They're not even making takes. That's a lot of philosophy, bro. Is like just asking questions and not even answering them. A lot of them don't even like they don't say they have the answers. They just kind of put out theoretical things and say, "Hey, this could be possible." And then, that's kind of how they build off certain things.
This thought experiment is doing is more concerned with your reaction
it's
to
cool
that
to think about.
possibility. If it terrifies you, you probably aren't living the kind of life you actually want to live. But if you embrace it, you're probably on the right track. But what if this is actually the case? When you die, everything resets back to when you were first born, and you go through all the same experiences again. For me personally, this seems pretty good. At least so far, my life has been pretty enjoyable. I had a happy childhood, and my early adult life has been interesting and rewarding so far.
Oh, 100K.
Assuming everything
epic.
goes according to plan, and my life continues to be fairly good on average, I think I would be content living this life over and over again for eternity. I guess I passed Nietzsche's test. It might sound a little depressing to know that this life is all there is, but every time I live my life, it feels like it's the first time.
Exactly.
Even if I've already had all these experiences in the exact same way, an infinite amount of times already, it still feels like the first time. All my experiences feel fresh and new. But with that being said, I have a pretty fortunate life, to the point that I'm basically as lucky as you can get. I had good life RNG. I'm a white straight man from Canada with enough money to live comfortably. I don't face any kind of oppression. I don't have any chronic pain. I have great friends and a loving family. But
Nice.
Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't so lucky. If eternal recurrence is true, everyone who has ever suffered would have to live through that for eternity. Everyone who died in a famone.
I kind of overlooked that part of it now that I think about it. I guess I'm just looking at my own life.
Everyone who died in a war would have to experience that over and over forever.
Yeah.
If we're extending this to non-human animals too, every single factory-farmed cow would have to live through that horrible existence for eternity. Every instance of suffering gets magnified an infinite amount of times. The same is true of positive experiences. You will have your first kiss an infinite amount of times.
It's going to be B tier. He's going to put this in B tier because it equals out. It levels
The
out.
suffering makes it seem like that might not be 100% worthwhile. If I was ranking this based solely on my own experience, I would put this pretty high. But because of all the conscious suffering, I'll compromise and stick it in B.
Predicted it! This is easily the longest
simulation
segment of the
argument
video.
is really
so.
big among Silicon Valley guys pretending to be philosophers. But the actual simulation argument was laid out by a genuine philosopher, Nick Bostrom. The argument goes like this. He lays out
Get some hair, bozo. Am I right, guys? We don't like bald people here. I'm just kidding. It's okay, people.
3 possible scenarios. In scenario 1, humans and other civilizations like ours probably won't advance technology far enough to create simulated realities, or creating simulated realities is impossible in the first place. In the second scenario, creating simulated realities is possible, but if a civilization creates one, it won't make a lot of them, because it requires too much processing power, or there's some other kind of limitation. And finally, creating simulated realities is possible, and there's no limit on how many get produced. These simulations would be entirely indistinguishable from ordinary reality. If we're in this scenario, we're almost certainly living in a simulated reality right now. The sheer number of simulated realities would outnumber actual reality by so much that the probability that we're in actual reality would be very close to 0. Now, Bostrom's argument makes a lot of pretty hefty assumptions. The first one is that mental states don't depend on their physical instantiation. Our current conscious experience happens to emerge from biological neural networks in our brain. But according to this view, this doesn't have to be the case. If we could create a silicon processor in a computer with the exact same neural network, the same conscious experience would arise. Consciousness is a matter of information processing. There's nothing more going on. This is known as substrate independence. To be clear, this is a pretty controversial take. A lot of philosophers of mind believe that consciousness isn't reducible to computation. Some believe that consciousness does require a specific kind of substance for it to emerge, like a brain. But for the purposes of this argument, we'll assume substrate independence for consciousness.
Okay.
Bostrom also spends some time in his paper laying out some concrete numbers, showing how the simulation might be done. If it does end up being possible, it will be really hard. But if we assume that technology continues to progress and accelerate, it doesn't really matter how long it takes. Based on how much computing power it takes to replicate a single piece of neural tissue, we would need a computer that could perform about 10 to the 14 operations per second to replicate a human brain. Other estimates sit a bit higher, at 10 to the 16 or 10 to the 17.
A bit higher? Dude, that changing that number in this equation makes it quite a bit bigger.
We'd have to generate some kind of environment for that brain too, and this really depends on how thorough we are with environmental simulation. At a minimum, we'd have to replicate the ordinary interactions humans might have with each other, or their environment. We couldn't program every single subatomic particle in the universe, so a lot of stuff would have to be left unrendered until a human came by to observe it. Based on all of this, along with a hypothetical computer design that could perform 10 to the 42 operations per second. Bostrom figures that civilizations in the distant future could indeed create simulations. There's nothing in principle preventing this from being possible.
That is true. That like at some point technology could reach that point. But it's like, has any civilization gotten to that point? That's really the question, I feel like. Because I don't want to say it's provable, but to me it seems very possible that a civilization could eventually, after a very, very long time, reach that point of technology where they could do this. But then it's like, then it answers the question of like, why would they do it? You know, maybe if I just say we're in a simulation, okay. I thought maybe I'd be like teleported or something, because I'm sure no one said that before.
Now, for the record, I'm not personally sold on the simulation argument. I'm not sure substrate independence is true. And I also don't know that it's a guarantee that civilization will continue developing forever. With climate change, resource depletion, and nuclear war, it's totally possible that we'll end up destroying ourselves. This might be thousands of years down the line, but we need a lot of time to make a simulation.
Yeah, but there could be a civilization that lives, 100 million light years away from us that has gotten past that point. But the thing is, we would never know. That's the thing. Also, I don't know why thinking about this type of thing, like, it makes me feel like someone's watching me, and it kind of freaks me out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm kind of freaked out right now. I've kind of always felt like that when talking about just very, like, certain topics just make me feel that way. It's like, I feel like someone's watching me right now.
This would also explain why we haven't encountered any alien civilizations.
You're like
It
paranoid.
could be that civilizations tend to self-destruct. And even if we make it that far,
start
and
looking behind
substrate
me.
independence is true, our future descendants might not even want to make simulations in the first place.
John
Should we
Wick.
run a simulation of all the suffering in the world if the beings in there have conscious experience just like us? If we created ancestor simulations of our whole civilization, we would be simulating famines, wars, and diseases as well.
Yeah.
But for our purposes here, my take doesn't really matter. If we are in a simulation right now, what happens when we die? Maybe it's like the episode of Rick and Morty, where they play Roy. In this episode, Morty straps into a virtual reality game called Roy, where he lives through the entire life of a man named Roy. He lives through childhood, attends school, becomes a football star, gets married, has a child, spends years working at a carpet store, is diagnosed with cancer, beats the cancer, and then dies in an accident. He's then presented with a game over screen, and wakes up again as Morty. He's obviously confused because he just spent 55 years living
Like salvia.
this virtual life, only to realize that it was all a game. In a Reddit thread about simulation and death, one smug Redditor put it this way: "We take our VR headset off and go, wow, that was so real. Take a piss, and then put the VR headset back on, ready to play a new character." This VR game possibility is kinda similar to reincarnation at first glance. You get to live through a whole life,
I
and
don't
then
think
swap it
so.
out for a new one when you're done. But it's not exactly the same, because it's a solipsistic existence. None of the people you encounter in the simulation are real. They're just parts of the simulation, like NPCs in a video game. All the friends and connections you make are illusions. This kinda sucks.
That's why it's like, I can't. This is probably the main reason why I don't want to believe in the simulation theory. Because like, this is one that I've thought about quite a bit, just randomly at times, and I always end off with like, I don't want it to be, so I'm not gonna make it my belief system that we're in a simulation, because I just don't want to look at the world like that, if I'm being honest. That might be naive, I guess, but I don't think it is, because the people that say, bro, I don't like the people that are like, it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed that we're in a simulation. You have no fucking clue, buddy. You have no idea. What are you talking about? You're talking out of your ass. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You are. I hate people that have opinions on stuff and act like it's so, like, they act like it's the truth. Like it's fact, even though there's no way to prove it. It's like when people talk about their religious beliefs. It's like, hey, I respect it and everything, but the way that some people talk about it is like, they're like, it's the objective truth. That's not fair, if that makes any sense. It's not like, because we all, to us, our beliefs are true. But to everybody else, your beliefs are just your beliefs. They're nothing else. So it's hard to, you can't just claim that you're telling the truth. But I feel like so many people have that mindset, subconsciously or not. It's just frustrating to me when I hear people say things like that. Not always with the religion, but that's just the one I see most. And it's just like you're not proving anything. You know what I mean? You're just telling me your beliefs in such you're like in a bliss,
Maybe it's like the Matrix, where we wake up and realize we're just being harvested for our energy or something. At least everyone in the simulation is still an instantiation of a real person, so all the connections you make are sort of real. But I think this case is strictly bad. At the level of ultimate reality, you're just being distracted with this fake world so that you can be enslaved. Okay, well, maybe we're all just a tiny portion of some kind of super AI god. The AI wanted to figure out how it was created.
Wait a minute. If I just press Alt F4 right now, I'll close out of the application. Hold on. You just imagine Alt F4 in your mind, and then you'll get out.
So it started running simulations of human civilization in the lead up to technological singularity. When we die, we just merge back into the AI god consciousness. And finally, maybe it's just the same as nothingness. Once our lifetime in the ancestor simulation is over, your consciousness ceases to exist. None of these possibilities seem desirable to me, and every single one of them seems to diminish the value of our world pretty considerably. We would all just be imitations of people who supposedly existed before the singularity happened. I'll put simulation in C tier.
Yeah, that's fair. The thing is, with each one of these, it's like when you're ranking them, it's like, well, there's so many interpretations of each one of them. It's like, it is a little hard to rank. You have to compromise quite a bit with some of these, I feel like. So, because I mean, especially with something like the simulation theory or even heaven, it's like there's so many different ideas. It's not like one set of beliefs that you can look at. But I think he's doing a pretty good job of covering everything.
There's an old joke that goes something like this. The Dalai Lama walks up to a hot dog stand, and he says to the man running the stand, "Hey, make me one with everything." The idea that we're all one consciousness has the connotation of being a bit hippy-dippy. It's often associated with meditation practice, or other techniques that supposedly reveal this truth. But this idea is actually pretty old. It's part of the system of reincarnation in some schools of Hinduism, where deep down we're all God or Krishna. It also emerged a few times in the Western intellectual tradition. Schopenhauer talked about this kind of thing a lot, for example. And some pretty famous physicists have described similar things, including Erwin Schrödinger, Freeman Dyson, and even Einstein. Sometimes this idea is called open individualism, which is a term coined by Daniel Kolak. There isn't really much academic philosophy on the subject, but there are a number of books about it, and it actually has a pretty sizable community on the internet. In this view, there are basically three ways you can look at personal identity. First is closed individualism. You start existing when you're born, and you stop existing when you die. Everyone is a separate observer that exists moment to moment. This is how most people intuitively think about it. Yeah. Next, there's empty individualism. Everyone has had the experience of trying to fall asleep, and suddenly, a cringy memory from your teenage years pops up. You're ashamed. You're embarrassed. What could you have possibly been thinking? It almost seems as if someone else had done it. But perhaps it was someone else. The you of the past. In every single...
Well, that's what I was saying earlier, is like, you're a different person. This is exactly what I was saying earlier, actually.
Moment.
Wow, I guess I'm just a philosopher. Gee, guys, I guess I'm just Plato. Yeah, well, I try to stay humble,
Different person. This is empty individualism. In this view, you're just a little dot on the timeline of your life. Each moment you exist is a different, unique entity that's constantly changing over time. We are just a moment of experience. And finally, there's open individualism. You are every moment of experience on everyone's timeline. The fact that some other entity is instantiating consciousness makes them identical to you. This might seem a little wacky at first, but stick with me here. Let's go back to closed individualism for a second. You're the same person from birth to death, but what's holding it all together? Maybe it's memory. I remember some of the stuff I did when I was 10 years old. My memory of who I used to be is the continuity between all the moments of my life. But this doesn't really work. We don't remember everything. That's not how memory works. I don't remember what I had for breakfast on New Year's Day of 2013.
And you always remember feelings more than exact memories.
And there are also false memories. People can be convinced of experiences that they never actually had.
Bro. I swear, I must have like daydreamed stuff as a kid and then thought of it as objective truth like years later. Because I swear there's times where like I think that something happened and I'm so certain that it happened and people are like, "What the hell are you talking about? This never happened." And then it's crazy when they could prove it too that it didn't happen or that something did happen that you didn't know about. It's like I don't know, man. It's just it kind of shows how faulty our minds are because we make up stuff all the time. Like our brains fill in so many gaps sometimes. It's like people think that our memory is reliable. It's not. It is not. It is the farthest thing from reliable. It is wrong all the time, I feel like. There's so many errors that it makes. Now, will you remember like key events? Yes, you'll probably remember pretty significant things. But especially the smaller the details, usually the more it gets like, ooh, yikes, it gets a little iffy. And that's also another thing with like, bro, it's so sad people with like dementia cuz like I just it's hard for me to comprehend something like dementia. I don't know why. It's just like I don't know. I just don't understand the feeling that they would have. And I feel really bad for people that have family members with dementia and stuff. It's like it's a really sad process. And I mean I have family members that have gone through that too, but it's like I just fortunately, even though it was a bad scenario, um the people that I know that have had it, they lived a long, good life and like all that. So like it's sad when people get it really early in age on things like that. It's like there's nothing you could really do to prevent that, and it's sad.
Okay, so memory's out. Well, what about my body? I've had the same body since the time I was born, but once again, this doesn't really work. The cells that make us up are constantly changing over time, like a ship of Theseus. Same goes for the brain. So all of this kind of hurts closed individualism. We can't seem to point to anything that ties it all together. So should we opt for empty individualism? Well, maybe not. Even though there doesn't seem to be anything tying it all together, it definitely seems like there's continuity in our experience.
Yeah.
But how can we get over the weirdness of open individualism? Well, think about your conscious experience for a second. From our perspective, there's basically no gaps in our experience. We're unconscious all the time when we sleep, but there doesn't seem to be any transitionary nothingness in between. It's almost an instantaneous change from falling asleep to waking up.
That's what's so weird, bro. Well, that's kind of the feeling of like amnesia, which is like amnesia's so weird, bro. Or not amnesia, anesthesia. Anesthesia, not amnesia. Like when you're under that, I've only had it once because I've only gotten surgery once, and I made a legendary video on it. Worst pain I've ever experienced. A very very interesting video. We'll say that. But it's such a weird feeling. It's such a weird feeling. Like it actually feels like if time travel was possible, that's what I feel like it would be like. I know that sounds a little weird, but
When I got my wisdom teeth removed, I remember laughing from the nitrous oxide as the surgeon prepared the equipment. And then, in the next moment, I was sitting in the recovery
it's
room.
like Kanye West.
It was as if no time had passed. It was a seamless transition. This continuity lasts from our first experiences as children until the instant we die. And
Yeah.
importantly, from our center of awareness, this block of experience doesn't have a beginning or end.
That's what's so weird about that's kind of what I was trying to get at with having like dementia or something like that is like this whole timeline it gets completely broken up because then it's like if you don't really know what is happening then you're not even like you're not even that same person anymore. That's why it's just so like it's depressing, man. And I'm not trying to make this like a depressing thing. It's just it's something I think about often cuz I mean a lot of people get dementia.
Kind of find ourselves in the world as if we've always been here. Objectively, we weren't always here, but it feels like this awareness is a constant because it's all we are. The only stable thing about me is my immediate conscious experience. It's the only thing I can really point to and say, that's me, because my body, my memories, and everything else is constantly changing. But here's the kicker. That immediate conscious experience is the same thing that other people have to point to. What you call I is the same thing that I call I. Now, with all that being said, I'm not totally sold on open individualism. But once again, let's just roll with it. Let's say we are all the same person. We're an identical subject of experience, but we're just different parts of it. So what does this say about death? Well, one suggestion might be that when we die, the illusion ends. As MC Ride once said, my experience is a momentary lapse of reason. Our identification with ourselves as one particular human stops, and we return to the ocean of being. But what would this be like? Would we experience all conscious experiences that all beings are having simultaneously? Almost like you're sitting in front of a bunch of screens, watching every single experience play out. This is a pretty tricky thing to wrap your head around, and it's unclear whether this state of being would be positive, negative, or neutral.
Truman Show.
But you might also consider the fact that right now, you're
Just what all the TVs reminded me of.
only one instantiation of consciousness. Maybe instead of returning to some default, where you're everything at once, you cycle through every instance of consciousness. This picture might look something like the short story The Egg by Andrew Weir. In this story, the main character, you, die in a car crash. You meet God, who explains that you've already reincarnated loads of times before. In your next incarnation, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD. In fact, you've actually been reincarnated as every single human being who has ever lived. You were Abraham Lincoln, Adolf Hitler, and Jesus. You were also every Holocaust victim and every follower of Jesus. This whole process is meant as a kind of test. Once you've lived every single human life, you become a god just like him. The universe was created so that you understand that every time you hurt someone, you're really just hurting yourself.
This is like main character syndrome. This is like saying that you're gonna end up being a god, that you are everybody. I don't like this thought, to be honest.
Every time you do something good for someone, you do it for yourself. This picture is a lot like reincarnation, but with a few key differences. First, it seems to be human only. You won't come back as a mosquito or a lion. And secondly, it doesn't seem to be tied to any kind of karma. You'll be cycling through every single human life, so the actions you take in your current life don't really have any meaningful bearing on your next lives, aside from the fact that you'll experience the other side of every interaction. This story also has a really important ethical implication that's kind of similar to the Veil of Ignorance thought experiment by John Rawls.
That's what I really liked about, I don't know why this reminded me of this, but if you guys ever seen The Good Place, I thought that show was really interesting when they ended up getting, spoiler alert for the show, but when they got into like the later seasons, they talked about how like the world got so complicated and it was hard to quantify good actions anymore because everything was so interconnected in the more complex world. And it's like, I think that's true, is like, it's really hard to genuinely make a positive impact on the world. I mean, all we could do is, do the best we can. I'm not saying that we should just give up. I think that's lame as hell to think like that. But now in present time, in modern times, everything's so connected. We're so connected to so many different areas of the world that we don't even directly interact with. You know what I mean?
You have no idea who you will be in society. You don't know your ethnicity, your gender, or your social status. Rawls argues that we should attempt to structure society from this perspective. Our principles should not be based on our current life and all the circumstances we happen to find ourselves in, but they should be based impartially, as if we could end up as anyone in society. The egg scenario is a lot like this because you're actually everyone. So the doctrine of do to others whatever you would like them to do to you takes on a very literal meaning because the others are also you. Now, this is a tricky one to rank. I'm not really sure what to think about returning to the ocean of being. It's hard to say what exactly that would be like. But as for the human-to-human exhaustive reincarnation idea, I think that's really great. You would quite literally get the full spectrum of human experience. every instance of suffering, pain, joy, ecstasy, and love. I think that's easily the most interesting possible situation. S tier.
S tier? I don't know. It seems like if you live every person's life, and then once you live every human experience that has ever happened, you become God. I don't know. If you like believe in this, then you're basically saying that you're a god. That's what you're saying. Like, I don't know. I feel like this could justify a lot of bad things.
So here's the final list. This video is not an exhaustive account of every possible situation that could happen when we die. I also don't really care to make the case for any of them being more plausible than any other. At the end of the day,
I don't think we know. W video. I loved that video.